Hi, it's Claudia, and today I wanted to talk to you about why do people use shame and condemnation. So this is, I have noticed it's a rather common behavior that people have. And this has happened very often in my life, especially growing up. So today I wanted to give you two examples that I have personally experienced and kind of like try to figure out why people do this so we can have more empathy towards them so we don't get caught up in using shame and condemnations ourselves because it is an unhealthy behavior. So, the first story is about my parents. So I was born in Romania and so were my parents. And what happened is that in the late 40s, through a series of events, Romania became under communistic government. So there was this man, maybe you have heard of him, Nicolae Ceausescu. He was suddenly the dictator. And the thing about communism, it's about control. So people were not free to express their opinions or to say anything against the government. And this was enforced by, I think, the army, the police, and then there was this that I have heard was the most horrendous, which is the secret police. So the secret police could have been anybody. It could have been your child, it could have been your parent, it could have been your spouse, your teacher, your work colleague, anybody. And so everyone was living in constant fear because I think I haven't experienced this or have known anyone because I was 6 when the communism fell. So I haven't heard much about this, but I think that they would take people to jail if they said something against the government because they wanted to control the people. So then anyone who spoke against the government was a threat. So they would just remove them and never to be heard from again, I think. So anyway, so my parents, they were born in the early 50s, so right a few years after the communism started, but they were raised in that environment of fear, of oppression. They couldn't speak their minds, and in a sense, the dictator was celebrated as God in that country. So religion was definitely forbidden. For some reason, they didn't destroy the churches, but the priests were they weren't allowed to practice there. You weren't allowed to talk about God or anything like that. So my parents were raised in that fear. It was constant. You didn't know if you could trust your grandmother. They might have been part of the secret police. So part of this, it's when we're talking about fear, we have to talk about control because they go together. So my parents had to control themselves, but they also had to control other people to get what they wanted. Because in addition to all of this, the dictator, he had made some bad decisions and he lost a lot of money, and it was up to the people to pay it back. So he was forcing the people into poverty, and you couldn't buy meat or anything like that. So it was really horrendous. So my parents were living in constant fear and they had to control other people to get what they wanted. And then suddenly they became my parents. And here I was, and I don't know about you because I haven't been around many people growing up, but I think I have always been a little weird in the sense that I would just say whatever came out of my mouth, or came out of my head. I didn't think about social rules and stuff like this. And so they obviously felt like they should control me. So in this control, in their attempt to control my behavior and to get me to behave and to do what they wanted me to do, because in addition to this whole communistic thing, there was also the judgment from other people if they were good parents. So if I was well behaved, aka control, then they were seen as good parents. And in this environment, image was everything, because you had to project an image, you couldn't speak the truth. So they used a lot of shame and condemnation with me, and sometimes they actually publicly humiliated me to control my behavior. And I have carried a lot of anger and resentment towards them. But the truth is that now that I'm mentally clear and I have resolved all those issues, I can understand that under that environment, they didn't have another option. So even though shame and condemnation is wrong, I no longer blame them for it or hold them responsible for my life now, because I have moved past the effects of that shame and condemnation that they have put on me growing up. So this is the first story about my parents. So when someone is under constant fear, and in the case of my parents, it was because of the communism, but in the case of other people, it could be anything. It could be fear of rejection. It could be fear of losing a job, losing a relationship. So when we talk about fear, we talk about control, because that's the only tool that fear has. You have to control. And I think that a lot of the time, people who use this shame and condemnation, I think they use it as a means to control. I think that they are bothered by something I or we say, and they don't have a different tool at their disposal to deal with this. They just want this thing, whatever is causing them negative emotions, they want this thing to be over with. And they have found, I guess, through observation, and then I'll tell you the second story, which is my story, that this works. If you shame someone, they will probably back off and they will stop saying the thing that bothers you. So the second story is my story. So I was born 6 years in 1983, but that's 6 years before the communism fell. But the idea is my parents grew up under communism and in that environment, and then I started growing up in it. Then the communism fell, but the people were the same. Just because you change location or you change conditions, the people are still the same unless you do something in particular about it. So what happened was that just by witnessing my parents and other people use shame and condemnation, my brain automatically picked it up. In addition to the fact that I was living in fear, so that was reinforced by the need to control other people and to just, because I had ended up, because of my childhood, I ended up sick with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So I was living in constant fear because people would trigger me and I was completely emotionally out of control. So I needed to stop people from hurting me because I didn't know what else to do about my emotions. I had no emotional skills up until last year, and I had no way to handle them. That was the only thing. Make them stop, whatever it takes. So I didn't even realize. So from my perspective, I didn't even realize that I was actually shaming and condemning other people. I thought that I was just basically defending myself, and I was in that position. I was backed into a corner and I had to lash out. There was no other option. So I think this is very helpful to remember that just because shame and condemnation is wrong and someone is using it, it doesn't necessarily make them a bad person. Because in my case, I didn't realize that there was an alternative. I had no idea that emotional skills existed, that we can learn them, that we can practice them, that we can get better. I thought that was it. this is life. So this is what happened in my case. So I have used shame and condemnation, and I have tried to make other people stop, but it was still wrong. So it's always wrong. Making someone feel badly about themselves is always wrong. But from the other side of it, I think we can practice. This is the key word: practice understanding and practice thinking about the other person. Maybe they just don't know better. Maybe it's a behavior that they picked up automatically. They don't realize what it means. Because in my case, for example, what happened was I was in such a defensive state, and I had been so hurt, and I was carrying that with me. There was nothing left. There was no emotional or mental bandwidth left to think about the impact of my words or of my actions on other people. I couldn't do it. There was no room for that, because I was basically, for 36 years of my life, I was in self-defense mode. And whether people attacked me or not, I felt attacked and I was acting out of it. So it's really important, and it has been for me, to learn that just because someone does it, it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. And it doesn't mean that I have to take it upon myself, because they're just like I did it out of my own self and emotional space. I didn't do it because of the person. The person happened to hurt me, but who doesn't? Like, we're all human beings here. So I think that this is really important, to separate the person from the behavior, and from our position, to give them the mental space that they can't, for whatever reason, give us in the moment. So, all right, this is a longer video already. So this is what I would like to invite you and to encourage you to do for the next few days, to remind yourselves that the person is not the same as the behavior, and everyone makes mistakes. Now, in the case of shame and condemnation, this is a learned behavior. I don't think that someone emotionally healthy and just having a bad day is going to resort to this, which is quite negative and quite unhealthy. So it's probably they picked it up, it's a behavior, they will do it again. But we have to remember that it doesn't have anything, or very well, I mean, I guess we did something that triggered it, but just because we did something, it doesn't mean it was something wrong. And we'll talk about that later, but we did something, but we shouldn't take their actions upon ourselves. So separate the person from the behavior, and understand that it probably, most likely, it is something that they picked up and that they're probably not even aware that they're doing. Because the people who are doing this on purpose to hurt us, I think that they're just a few in the world. I mean, I don't even know if we've met any, and what difference does it make? Because now we know that there is no value to be gained from thinking about the person or the behavior or the shaming or the condemning. All right, so in the next video, I'm going to talk about what do we do when someone has shamed us. So how to not take that upon ourselves, and like I used to, just spiral with the thinking, and oh, why did they do this, and why did I deserve it, or did I deserve it, or maybe they're right, and stuff like this. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope that this has helped you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.